Hey everybody, Taz from Critical Thinking Anarchist here, and I wanted to talk a little bit. This is going to be kind of a rambling video. I'm not entirely sure where I'm going to go with this. I wanted to talk a little bit about kind of geeks and nerds and kind of where everything came from and where everything has gone to. So I grew up in the 80s and 90s. When I was coming up, nerds, it was more nerds than geeks at that time as far as like the terminology. And when I was coming up, that was, everybody, the nerds were the underdogs. The nerds were in movies and TV shows and everything else, started off as like you didn't want to be a nerd. Nerd was like the worst thing you could be because we were still coming off the 50s, 60s, and 70s mentality where you wanted to be the sports guy, you wanted to be the jock. And, nerds were just starting to be recognized because nerds understood technology. Nerds understood computers. Nerds understood VCRs. Nerds understood, pop culture in a different way than it had been looked at previous. So nerds, it was something I gravitated to because TV and movies kind of taught me that's what I should be. That's what I was. Looking back, this is kind of where it goes, how you identify. It's like I thought I was, but, this is where, in my school, I was constantly bullied. I was too sporty, too cool or whatever for the nerds and too nerdy for the cool people. And my family was at the time middle class. So we weren't lower middle class. We were middle class. And the school I went to was like top 100 in the nation. And I'm not kidding. It was actually ranked somewhere. I don't know where exactly what at that time. But we were top 100 in the nation. A lot of very affluent people. It was a lot of, I don't even know the professions, a lot of the people. But a lot of it was old money. These were people who had parents, who had grandparents, probably even great-grandparents, who were business people, who started businesses, who worked as doctors and lawyers and real estate agents and things like that and made a lot of money. But their families have always had money as far as we were concerned. So I was definitely not one of them. And I apologize. Like I said, this is going to be kind of a rambling thing. But I identified more as a nerd than as one of these rich sports kids, rich jocks, whatnot. And nobody liked being a jock. Maybe you wanted to be a preppy, but everybody around me was preppy. That was, again, these are terminologies from when I was growing up. I wasn't sporty. I wasn't playing sports. I liked hockey. I liked baseball. Hockey was too expensive for my family. Baseball I loved, but just the couple times I tried to get into it, I wasn't particularly good. Loved my dad. My dad was a great guy, but he loved baseball. He loved hockey. But he wasn't one of those guys that really kind of got out in the backyard and tossed the ball around with you and taught you how to hit and taught you how to do this. The one time that I did, I gave him credit, all the credit in the world. He was there for me. He tried to be there for me. He just wasn't into it enough to understand it, at least as a dad. And my dad was more of the, those who can't teach, he can do. He couldn't teach. He could not teach to save his life. He was a doer. So to try and teach me how to play baseball or hockey or anything else, he couldn't do it. He could do it. He could play. He could do all that stuff, but he couldn't teach you how to do it. He had no idea how to pass that type of knowledge on. So that's to say, that's kind of where I identified more with the nerd and geek culture. I got into technology. I got into trying to understand computers, and but again, we weren't rich, so we couldn't just, and we lived out in the boondocks. I mean, it was 15 minutes into town, and town was already 15 minutes into anything else. We didn't have, it was a small town. We didn't have, a local Radio Shack or whatever else. We had to drive, 25 minutes away to the nearest area that had that, to the nearest mall and whatever that had all that type of stuff. So again, this is kind of a little background on how I identify the way I did, how I went into nerd culture. One thing we did do a fair amount, oddly enough, was watch TV galore. We constantly watched TV because there wasn't anything else to do. Our yard was a literal gravel pit. We bought it out of a gravel pit, so it took years for things like grass to grow. I'm not kidding. It was a literal gravel pit. We bought it off of a gravel pit company. So it was mostly rock and sand. So there wasn't much to play in the backyard. We didn't have much of a backyard for many, many years. And again, we weren't close to anybody. We weren't in a neighborhood. So I couldn't do any of that. So we watched TV, we watched movies, we watched a lot of movies, and kind of everything. So again, this is background on how I came up to this. So, but again, because we were so far away from all this stuff and we didn't buy a lot of things, I didn't get into comics. I didn't get into, my dad taught me about Mad Magazine. I bought one or two of those, but again, I probably had like 3 to 5 my entire life, of Mad magazines. Didn't quite understand it other than it was supposed to be funny. And, I had a few and that was it. Didn't get into comics, even though my dad talked about comics. My dad talked about Mad magazines. Like, these are all the things that he grew up with that he thought about doing something about, but he never followed through with any of that. So the closest thing I had was TV and movies telling me that I should be a nerd because nerds like comics and Mad magazine and things like that. And then I got into, of course, superhero cartoons. So the 90s, X-Men, Spiderman, Batman, Gargoyles, things like that. And I gotta say, the 90s X-Men was probably the second greatest show behind the 90s Spider-Man. And I like the, I kind of like the 70s and 80s versions as well. Of those cartoons, but I honestly think the 90s Spider-Man was the best, 90s X-Men second best, and 90s Batman right after that. I mean, and these are like 1A, 1B, 1C. Change your mood any different day, and they're going to switch just a little. They're going to switch order on that. I honestly think the Spider-Man was probably the smartest written, just because of the quick whips. The quick wits. From Spidey himself and the constant way it made you think. Anyway, so that kind of comes into, this is why I'm reviewing the X-Men 97 shows, because I remember that so fondly growing up as a kid. Every Saturday morning I was there constantly watching that. So fast forward to late 90s, I got into, working. I started working at Spencer's. And that's where I really fell into nerd culture, because I kind of fell into it a little bit at school. But again, I didn't identify with everybody there. So I really started identifying with nerd culture there because, of course, everybody at Spencer's was a nerd in some form. My one boss was not a hipster, kind of a Chrissy Hines style punk. From the Pretenders, Chrissy Hines, she has that look. Changed her hair, hair color all the time. My other boss was a former employee from Disney, from Walt Disney World. So he had done tours, he had done other things there. Really, after he got through the first few months, really got me into entertainment culture, understanding what all happened with all that, with because he had personal stories from the animation department and the things they went through, and all the things that the true Disney employees went through during those times, during the mid 90s and whatnot. One of my other friends at the time, super into Space Ghost, super into other things. And at the time, I was not a good friend of his. I really didn't care for him, but we eventually became, very good friends over the years. And then other people, of course, throughout the years came and went, because I stayed with them for the first time, and I came and went several times, but first time I was with them for 5 years. So, and at the time they were owned by Universal Studios. So, we had, fantastic. If you remember Spencer's in the 90s, you remember amazing product, amazing merchandise, because we had the Universal Monsters figures, we had like the Child's Play figures, we had the horror figures, it was great. It was a fantastic time to get there. And I came in right at the end of their Myths and Legends fantasy figures run, which I still have several of, which are really cool. And so that was where I really started getting into nerd and geek culture. So I went to college, came back, and when I was coming back from college, I was coming back during the summer, and sometimes I would work there, sometimes I worked other things, and I worked a lemonade stand for a couple of years, and we would go to several different events. Did Billy Graham one year, and was literally stuck in the middle of a tornado. We were in Iowa. I did the Minneapolis Pride Festival several times. And again, one of the nice things about being in working at Spencer's and whatnot, and especially working in a mall, is you work around a lot of different people from a lot of different things. I was exposed to so much I had never been exposed to. So we had a lot of gay and lesbian people in the area. I think I might have actually directly worked with one once at Spencer's. My bosses were the ones doing the hiring, so it's not like I was in charge of just you get who you get type of thing. But a lot of the people in the mall worked, and it's one of those things for me, especially at that time. It doesn't matter what doesn't matter what you are or whatever else, as long as you're not an asshole. I still try to be that way. Personally, on a personal level, I don't care who you are. As long as you're not an asshole, I'll give you a shot. And for the most part, nerds and the LGB at the time, LGB community, for the most part, we're basically the same. A lot of, if you do like a Venn diagram, those circles are very close, do a lot of selective things. And it's because we kind of went through a lot of the same thing, a lot of ostracization, a lot of just wanting to be acknowledged, just wanting to be treated like normal, just wanting to not be treated like crap, honestly. Really, that was what we were fighting for at the time. We tried to accept everybody. Now, with my Warhammer video, what I was kind of talking about the gatekeeping part. Within just being LGBT, within just being a nerd, there was no real gatekeeping. Hey, anybody at the time, anybody who wants to, to be around, as long as you're not an asshole, happy to talk to you, happy to do whatever, happy to hang out, happy to, one-on-one. And there are people that vehemently disagreed with on a lot of things, but, nice as heck in person, personable people, great people, all that stuff. Again, I apologize, a lot of rambling. But when it came to the games and things like that, there was gatekeeping. When you're talking Warhammer, when you're talking comics, when you're talking other things, when you're talking employees. When I started getting promoted and becoming a boss at Spencer's and doing the hiring, I wanted to gatekeep a bit because I want the best employee. Now, my big boss, my manager, was more about getting a body in the store, someone who can do the job. I didn't want somebody who could do the job, because I watched the people who could do the job and they came and they went like crazy. There's a reason retail has a high turnover, and it's because they hire people who can do the job, not people who want the job. I wanted people who wanted the job. I wanted people who wanted to be at Spencer's. I wanted the person who came in a little nervous, because if you're nervous, it tells me you want to be there. If you're not nervous, if you couldn't care less, why do I care? What are you here for? I want a job. Okay, why Spencer's? Well, you guys are hiring. Okay, do you know anything about us? Well, not really. Why do I want you? Why do I want you over everybody else that's coming in? Now, you talk to me like, hey, I love Spencer's. I've been here a few times before. I'm really interested in this place. Maybe I don't know as much as I'd like to know, but I mean, you guys sell some cool stuff, and I love the atmosphere around here, all that stuff. That at least gives me an interest in you. So, and then again, the nerd culture with games is kind of the same thing. Why do you want to play Warhammer? Are you interested in it, or you just heard about it and you're like, what is this? If you just heard about it and what is this? Okay, I can't. It's going to take hours to try and explain, everything that you need to explain just to get started. Why do you want to play? When I got into, and again, I was in video games at that time. I love video games. It usually takes you a couple hours playing video games to understand what's going on. Even when they do the tutorial stuff, when you're playing Legend of Zelda and they, like Ocarina or whatever, on the 64 or later, and they do the tutorials and you go, okay, do this, okay, do that, do that. And they familiarize yourself with the controllers. Get yourself a little familiarized with the storylines. Again, when I got into Warcraft, when I played Warcraft 1 and 2, I didn't play Warcraft 3 until long after World of Warcraft. When I played Warcraft 1 and 2, I didn't pay attention at all to the stories, to the missions. I just wanted to kill orcs. I just wanted to kill trolls. I just wanted to kill humans, depending on which side I was on. It was a fun RTS. When I played Command and Conquer, I don't really pay attention to the storylines, whatever. I just played it. I still play Command and Conquer, and it's one of the most fun games. I love skirmishing. I don't like doing tournament mode. I like building my stuff up and really kicking butt. So, getting into the stories was a thing I did long after. And again, even when I started World of Warcraft, something I got into long after. I would have been gate kept out, big time on all those. If I had to go through that, and rightfully so to a point. But I had friends, I had relatives that wanted to get me into those. So they would have at least pushed a little bit, like, hey, no, seriously, you got to try this out. Hey, read this book. At least start reading it. Tell me what you think. So there's nothing wrong specifically with gatekeeping. You want to gatekeep a bit. You want to get people who are interested in it. The problem that has happened over the last several years, mostly the last 10 to 15, because I got into cosplay, I got into all that stuff, and we had, again, great friends that introduced me to it. I had no idea what this stuff was. I was a theater student. I had no idea what cosplay was. We had one girl in my theater class who was a cosplayer, but she was more into, she thought she wanted theater, and she didn't want theater. She was gate kept out of theater. My one professor made sure of that. He hated her. He tried to gatekeep me out, but I was like, screw you. I'm too stubborn for that. So, and I passed. She dropped out her second year. But she didn't want theater. She wanted the high school theater atmosphere, which in college, that is not the same thing. College theater is childish as hell, but it is not the same as high school theater. Especially when, your high school group of friends is a bunch of anime nerds. But oddly enough, cosplay is probably more theater than current theater is these days. And a lot of the cosplayers are incredibly utilitarian, I think, is not quite the word I'm looking for, but they're self-sufficient. A lot of them know how to create their own costumes. They get into the storylines of things. They research things like crazy, but the downside to traditional theater versus like cosplaying stuff is you only have one one work of art that you can really go off of when you're looking at a Shakespeare thing. If you're looking at Macbeth or whatever, you can only go off Macbeth. You can't go off of Romeo and Juliet for inspiration. So you can really go off of the one piece of work. There's not this entire world that you can go off of. And that's pretty much the same with any of the playwrights. You can only go off of what they have for that story. You can't go off of other things most of the time. There are a few playwrights that you can kind of do that on, but most of the time you can't. And again, I apologize. This is just going all over the place. So back to the nerd portion of this. So the reason why this is, because I got into the cosplayer thing after I graduated theater. So I'm old at this point. I'm in my late 20s, early 30s. And again, at the time, so this is mid to late 2000s. At the time, it was a lot of fun. Again, open, welcoming, and again, the nerds and the LGBT plus at that point communities kind of seriously overlapping. Again, all we're wanting is acceptance. All we're just wanting is people to just acknowledge it. Everybody just wanted to be loved, and the message was good, but you could already start to see it then. People had started getting into positions of power. Nerds have started gaining power. LGBT plus people were starting to gain power, and they're abusing that power. Power corrupts. Absolutely. Nerds are starting to gatekeep things that hadn't been gatekept before in ways they haven't been gatekept before. Suddenly they're enacting authority over people. Suddenly nerds aren't good enough nerds. Oh, you like this, but do you like this? Do you like this enough? LGB was kind of the same thing. Yeah. And we really saw that one. So the LGB one really didn't start hitting until the mid 20 teens. You're not gay enough, which is a weird one. Okay, you're gay, but you're not gay enough. You're not, you're not androgynous or whatever. You're just a traditional gay. And it doesn't make any sense. People have become the things they absolutely hated. You're not tolerant enough. When does tolerance end? We're intolerant of your, of how intolerant you are of us. Like, well, I don't like pedophiles. Well, that means you're anti-gay. Like, wait a minute, what? Nobody should be for that. Nobody from any side should be for that. And again, this is, it doesn't matter on what side you're on. Nobody should be for molesting kids. Nobody should be for trying to turn kids away. There's a difference between accepting people for who they are. I have absolutely, accept people for who they are. Just because they're different doesn't mean they should be excluded. And unfortunately, I'm a jerk in a lot of that. I have my own judgmental issues on that. But that's me. I don't want to pass that on to my own son. I don't want to pass that on to my children, where my biases go to them. I want them to make up their own minds, and I want to try and teach them to be better people than I am. But I don't want to teach them that they have to accept everybody no matter what, because that's wrong. And I don't want to teach them that they have to not only accept, there's a difference between accepting people for different and encouraging. And that's where we are now. We're encouraging things that had never been encouraged before. We're encouraging people to be gay. We're not letting them figure that out for themselves. We're saying, no, you should be gay. You should be lesbian. No, you should be trans. You're in the wrong body. No, you should be a nerd. No, you should be this and you should be that. No, it's like you present them the options. You present them the information. Over time, hopefully they use that information to figure out who they are, what works best for them. And that's where we're at. We're at a very, very scary point right now where things can go very badly very quickly. And we're seeing that right now in colleges, with all them doing what they're doing, being the people who are supposedly pro-Palestine and anti-Jew for some reason. I don't know. We're just at a very scary time. I'm honestly kind of scared. With my children as they grow up. I'm scared for my family's children as they grow up, and I hope they don't have to go through the violence that might be coming. I hope I'm worried for nothing. But again, it's an odd time. This weird power that people perceive they have. And unfortunately, companies gave a lot of these people this weird power because of Facebook and Twitter. Partially TikTok, partially, all the other social media, but mostly Facebook and Twitter. They gave them this power and thought it was real. Much like anything, power is always perceived. Power is always perceived. It is rarely real. Unless you are literally forcing people physically to do something, any power that someone has is merely perceived until it is taken away or altered. But yeah, the stuff that's going on in nerd culture right now, where you got these people who are, and it is this overlap now. It is the overlap of the LGBT plus, LGBTQIA plus, whatever it is at this moment. The nerds who got in, they didn't like things the way they were, and so they changed it from the inside. And because that's what we always told them: you don't like it, change it. You don't like it, change it. And they changed it. Thing is, they changed it for themselves. And they thought they were bigger than they are. And the worst part is, we let them change it. Because we didn't have the same drive that they did. Companies thought their audiences existed, and now they're losing money. Now they're going out of business. They're losing the audiences that they had. And this is a big failing in business. This is a whole nother video, but this is a big failing in business. Constantly chasing the new. I saw this one of my first jobs out of college. I was working at my local credit union. And they started doing programs chasing new customers, which there's nothing wrong with that. There is 100%, I want to say this, there's 100% nothing wrong with trying to gain a new audience. In fact, everybody should try to gain a new audience. You should always be looking to expand. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Problem is, when you're offering a new audience, something you never offered your current audience, your current customers, your current base, whatever it is, when you're only providing this thing, either it's a discount or it's, again, at my credit union, it was, if you open an account and whatever, you got $100 after a year or whatever it was, if you kept it. But it was only available to new customers. This was not something they did for current customers. And if you were a customer within a year or however long it was, or had ever had an account, I don't remember what the terms were at the time, but whatever it was, you could not get this. If I opened a new account, but I had an account with them, I couldn't get this. And we had people leave as a result of that. And it's like, well, yeah, you gotta, it's one thing, it's like, hey, if you open a new checking account, doesn't matter if you're current or not. If you open a new checking account and you do this and you set it up and whatever, you get the $100. That's fine. Because that pleases new customers and that pleases your current customers. Then it's a choice for them. Okay, well, I don't really want to go through that. For $100, big deal, whatever. Who cares? Or for $100, hey, absolutely. I'll do something I'm already doing. I'll open a new account, make it look good for you guys. Who cares? So it works either way. So these companies gave this power to these people because they thought it would gain them this new audience. The new audience doesn't exist because it's an audience of 1 or an audience of 5 or an audience of 10 or an audience of 30. It's not hundreds. It's definitely not even thousands or tens of thousands or even millions. These are tiny, tiny, tiny fractions. And what it does is alienate your current base. Again, I apologize. This ended up really long. I apologize for kind of the rambling there. It's all over the place. Like I said, I had no specific thoughts on this one, so I probably don't expect people to hang around too much on this video. If you did, I appreciate you so much. Tomorrow I'm going to be buying a verified Twitter account. Thursday, I will be watching and reviewing the episodes 7 and 8 of the X-Men 97 show. I believe episode 8 is going to be the last one for the season. I watched episode 7 last week because there was some big spoiler thing in there that I saw, and it turned out not to be a big deal whatsoever. Kind of been blown out of proportion. It's stupid. I'll just say it involves Captain America. But again, it ended up being blown way out of proportion. In fact, even the cameo wasn't really worthwhile. But in the meantime, guys, I hope you guys are all doing well. I wish you the best. I thank you for all you have done so far, and we will see you later this week.